With the 15th pick and with the 26th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft, the Washington Redskins select Dwayne Haskins, Montez Sweat.
Welcome all my fellow Redskin brethren and sistren. I am your man and resident Redskins fan, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on the Redskins Report. Training Camp Primer episode number 2. Numero dos. And this episode, not to be confused with episode 1 where we talked about the 5 biggest storylines, but rather the biggest concern heading into training camp is what we'll be talking about here on episode number 2. Remember, 3-part series entitled Training Camp Primer as we get you prepared for training camp here on the Louie Network. And so we talked about the 5 biggest storylines heading into the season already, but just because those are the big storylines doesn't mean that's the thing you're most concerned with, all right? So I'm not most concerned with the Trent Williams situation, even though that's the biggest storyline heading into this training camp. My biggest concern is something I'll talk about here in a second, but first, if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the Louie Network for more great content, especially if you're a Redskins fan. You're going to get it all year long. But even if you're a fan of another team, I cover all 32 teams. Make sure you subscribe to the Louie Network. Make sure you like this video. And I'm definitely looking forward to your comments on this particular video because this is a very subjective, much like last episode and even the next episode, very subjective topic, meaning it's opinion-based. So what I think isn't necessarily what you think. You may have a very different view. You may have a very different, bigger concern and biggest concern heading into training camp. And it may be something that may come from a totally different angle, and I may not be thinking about it. I want to hear from all of you out there. So make sure you drop a like and a comment in the comment section of this video telling me how you feel about the Redskins' biggest concern heading into training camp. That being said, also check out the Louie Network podcast, available on Stitcher, Google Music Play, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, and of course, the website louietnetwork.net. That being said, let's get to the Redskins' biggest concern heading into training camp. Man, when I look at this football team, there are a number of things you can be concerned about. We talked about a lot of them in the 5 biggest storylines. You could be concerned about left guard. You could be concerned about the receiver position there. You could be concerned with the lack of depth at safety. You could be concerned about linebacker, all right, with the injury to Reuben Foster and now having to bring in guys from the outside that were on the streets. There could be a number of things that scare you right now. The Trent Williams situation could easily be your biggest concern, and I would not disagree with that necessarily. However, my biggest concern for the Redskins heading into training camp is at the quarterback position and not necessarily the competition itself. I think it will play itself out. I think that you'll end up with one of the veterans starting, whether it be Colt McCoy or Case Keenum. Doesn't really matter at this point. To me, they're very comparable players. I think you're going to get similar production out of both. Maybe a little bit more upside with Case Keenum as he's shown he can win with a very good defense in this league. And so we think the Redskins have a chance to have a really good defense. We'll see what happens. But my biggest concern rather, for the Redskins heading into training camp is potentially rushing Dwayne Haskins into the starting lineup. We've seen quarterbacks be destroyed, and we've also seen them succeed, starting them right away, day number 1, week 1, right out of the gate. All right, there isn't a right or wrong answer to this. There isn't an exact science on how to handle a quarterback. You just have to play it by eyes and ears. And you got to see how this guy looks in camp every day, how he's handling the terminology, how he's commanding the huddle, how he's commanding the line of scrimmage, how he's interpreting what he sees and his adjustments to what he sees. Can he protect himself? Can he get everybody lined up quickly enough so that he can make the proper adjustments pre-snap? Can he get in and out of the huddle? There are so many different nuances that come with the quarterback position. And this is one of the reasons why when you come from a pro-style offense in college, when you're accustomed to calling plays in a huddle, when you're accustomed to seeing things at the line of scrimmage and not relying on your coach to tell you what you should be looking for and looking at a card instead of calling out plays, that's why all of those things are important, because it speeds up the process. And so he was a guy that didn't deal with any of that stuff, didn't have a lot of experience at Ohio State, only 1 year as a starter. There's a lot of things that Dwayne Haskins has to learn and fully grasp before you throw him to the wolves at the next level. Not to mention, we've got a situation with Trent Williams that might not be ideal for him if Williams is not at left tackle to start this season off. But that's nor here nor there. That's not my biggest concern. My biggest concern is that he's not ready week one, and Dan Snyder, and we heard what was reported, what Doug Williams came out and said, that this is a joint decision. All right. Doug Williams came out and said, this is going to be a decision from Jay, which it should be Jay's and Jay's alone if you want me to be brutally honest with you. But he said it's going to be a decision that's made by Jay, that's made by Dan, that's made by Bruce, that's made by Doug, which scares the living daylights out of me, scares the shit out of me as a Redskins fan, because we know that Dan can get very antsy and Dan wants asses in seats. You know what's going to put asses in seats? And look, we've got a very advantageous schedule early on that's going to put butts in seats. When you're playing the Bears at home, the Bears travel well. They've got a lot of anticipation for the upcoming season. It's a Monday night game. I expect a lot of Bears fans to come in and take over FedEx Field. Same can be said for the home opener versus the Cowboys. The schedule makers did the Redskins a huge favor by scheduling them opponents, New England, in week 5. These are all games that are going to draw teams on the East Coast or in the Midwest that will travel well, that will come take over FedEx Field. You won't have a problem with ticket sales early on in the season. So I'm hoping that that's not something that goes into the decision-making process and factors into their final decision when deciding on a quarterback. If Dwayne Haskins is by far and away the best quarterback, or it's a very close competition and we really can't tell the difference between the three of them, then he needs to go ahead and start. All right, sooner rather than later, get him out there, get him some reps under his belt, live bullets, get him to see the game. He's only going to get better by experience. He's not going to take mental reps and become a beast. That's not how this works. He's got to play, but he needs to play when he's ready. I've seen guys come into this league with talent and get thrown into the fire too soon, lose confidence because they're getting their ass whooped, they're making mistakes, they're not seeing the field well. It's all about confidence at this level, all right? You've got to have skill, but confidence is right there as one of the things you have to have in order to succeed, especially at the quarterback position. You can lose that very quickly if things don't go well for you early on in the process. And so I look at Haskins as a guy that needs time. And Haskins himself looks at his situation as one that needs time as well. Let's listen to what he had to say as we'll take a look at his direct quote. There was a story written by John Keim for ESPN right at the break of the mandatory minis. And he was able to get some quotes from Jay Gruden. He was able to get some quotes from Dwayne Haskins. And here's what Haskins said about him potentially starting week number 1. And he quotes, all right, and I quote him, once I learn the playbook, I know what I'm doing. I can call out the reads and point out site adjustments and move protections. Everything else will go from there. So I feel 1 full year, okay, 1 full year of learning would do me justice. I'm not worried about starting week 1. I just want to be ready to play week 1, whether that's this year or next year. Whenever that time comes for me to play, I want to make sure that when I do play, I don't want to look back. So essentially what he's saying with that quote is that he knows that he's not ready to go yet. All right. Now, if the coaching staff decides that he's the best man for the job, he wants to be prepared to hit the field week 1 and help his team win. But If the coaching staff says, hey, bro, you need time, Haskins is fine with that because he understands he needs time. He's not fully comfortable. Even when he went to Ohio State, he didn't jump into the starting lineup. He sat behind JT Barrett and learned, all right? And that's what he needs to do here. I'm not saying he needs to sit the entire season, all right? I think at some point he needs to play in 2019. He needs to get reps. He needs to be out there. He needs to experience what it's like to play in an NFL game, the speed of the game. He needs to be able to see blitzes coming his way and what protections and things he needs to do. Like he said, he needs to make side adjustments at the line of scrimmage. He needs to be able to slide protections and get everybody set up. If he needs to keep the tight end to block, if he needs to slide his line to the left or slide his line to the right or pinch his line to the inside to pick up a double A-gap blitz, he needs to be able to do those things. If he needs to change a run from the left to the right, he needs to be able to see that pre-snap. They're overloading the left. We have a run to the left. They're in a look that's going to stop us from running to that side. I'm going to move the run to the right side. He has to see all those things. Right now, he's a rookie. And him having to call plays and him having to do all of these things, get to the line of scrimmage with enough time to be able to make these adjustments, don't know if he's going to be there where we need him to be successful right away. And I'm just hoping that the Redskins don't rush him into the starting lineup when he's not ready. He even said it himself. He wants to be ready, doesn't know if he's going to be there in year one. And so, especially not early on in the season. Maybe as the season progresses, you could throw him out there. Even if he's not ready per se, you still want to give him some reps. But week one, I just don't want to rush this guy. Now, again, let me reiterate this. If he is by far and away the best quarterback, or this competition is a razor thin close between the three of these quarterbacks, then what do you have to lose by throwing Dwayne out there? All right, if he's the best option we've got, or you're not sure what's the difference between him and some veterans, which if we can't tell the difference between him and two veterans that have been in this league for a number of years that should be able to really separate themselves from a rookie that doesn't know the playbook, one, two, the speed of the game, and three, the terminology of the playbook. If they can't separate themselves, then maybe he needs to be starting anyway. So my thing is, my biggest concern is that they rush Dwayne Haskins into the lineup. He's our future, all right? We have to get this right. You don't stay. I've said this numerous times. You don't have a quarterback. You don't have a chance in this league. Right now, as we sit here, us and the Giants are the only two teams that don't have a definitive option at the quarterback position. We both feel like we've drafted that guy this year. We have to get this right. You saw how Robert Griffin III's regression set us back in this franchise. And the only thing that saved us was that we had Kirk Cousins that we drafted in the same year that we drafted Robert Griffin III. Or else we would have been one of the bottom feeders of the league. Kirk kept us afloat. But you saw how this thing went last year without Kirk and without a definitive quarterback. We had Alex Smith, but he wasn't playing all that well before he got injured. And I don't know how that situation was going to go. So there's nothing like having your own young, budding star at the quarterback position. We have a chance to potentially have that, but we've got to make sure we go about it the right way. And that's my biggest concern, that Doug talking about this being a joint decision and that Dan and Bruce and himself are going to be in the decision-making process when regarding Dwayne, guys that aren't at practice every day, that aren't watching film of Dwayne, that I don't want them to overreact to Dwayne shredding the Cleveland Browns in week one of the preseason in the third and fourth quarter against guys that aren't going to be in this league when we get to week one. I don't want him getting excited about Dwayne lighting it up in preseason game number 2, in the second quarter when there aren't any starters in the game. I just want them to understand that this is a process. I think Doug understands that. I'm not sure about Bruce and Dan. And I don't know if they even care. That scares me. I think that cooler heads will prevail and they'll do the right thing. But with this organization, you can never be too sure. So what's your biggest concern heading into training camp with this Redskins football team? Leave it in the comment section. I can't wait to read. I am a Redskins fan, etched in burgundy and gold. My Redskins spirit will never die. Redskins spirit will never fold. Until we meet again, hail to our beloved Washington Redskins. That's going to do it for your man Louie T here on episode number 2 of Training Camp Primer. Come and join me for the third and final episode of Redskins Training Camp Primer as we get you ready for 2019 training camp in Richmond for our Washington Redskins. I'm your man Louie T, signing off. Until next time, have a good one.
Louie T Network.